Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Simon, and welcome back to CSharpCorner live episode. In this episode of Ask Me Anything, we have Mia Chang, a Microsoft AI MVP, joining us from all the way from Berlin, and she's going to talk today on how conversational AI application really works. In the past, we have an episode about voice tech where James and Sanjeev talked about the developers now moving into voice technology and how bots, virtual assistants like Alexa and Google Home have taken place in our day-to-day lives. And today's episode is really going to be very interesting as Mia has some amazing slides and presentation she's going to take you through. And without wasting time, let me bring upon our today's guest. Hi Mia, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, where you're joining from? What is your time over there?
I think like from our time is 10 in the morning.
Okay, 10. That's a
Yeah.
little early for you.
I think it's okay. For
Okay, so
Saturday,
weekend.
maybe yes, but for weekday,
Yeah,
it's okay. Yeah.
it's perfect. Yeah. So Mia, just go ahead and give a brief introduction about yourself, about who you are, what you do, and what we're gonna talk about in this next 40 or 50 minutes.
Yeah, I think like myself that I'm a Microsoft MVP for about 3 years. So I mostly focus on computer vision projects and also some text analysis. So recently I have more time to have a look on conversational AI because I think it's a really interesting topic for me. I will share you some something that I learned in this one, and then also what I want to share. And actually, like I found the conversational AI application is kind of like you could use widely in different scenarios. So I think that maybe my talk could inspire some of you, and then maybe you could bring this idea into different industry or different use case. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. It sounds very interesting. And I'm going to pull up your slides now, right?
Yeah.
So that you can go ahead and start. And it's all yours. You can go ahead, Mia.
Okay. So I hope you could see my share screen right
Yeah, we
now.
can
It
see your
should be
screen.
like the first page of the slides. How does a conversational AI application work? So in this one, you could see some facts about me. So I work as a senior data scientist in Achilles. It's a real estate company that we have different apartments leasing out. And work in the Berlin office, which is our own only one technical office in our company because we also have other branches in Sweden, in States, and in France, also other European countries as well. Um, Also, I'm a Microsoft AI MVP. So since the time that I joined community, I really enjoy to have conference call and then community talk with different topics. So I hope you will enjoy the content today. As you see, like on the right hand side, you see a book, Microsoft AI MVP book. It's a book that I co-authored with other 16 different MVPs across different countries. We published last year winter on the Amazon Kindle. So actually, it's quite an interesting book because we gather a lot of different ideas about the AIs on the Microsoft, and then also people are from different countries, like start from New Zealand, and then also people from India, and also people from Europe. Like you could imagine, like how when we collaborate together, it's kind of like across different time zone. So it's really interesting and to see how people work together. And this year, I will also publish another book called AI using Microsoft Cognitive Service. Will be on the Manning publisher. If you also, as a part of the technical reviewers of Manning, maybe you already received letters regarding if you want to review our book. So look forward to what's the things next. If you have any questions later, you could ask on the YouTube comments or any platform that you're using right now that I will see from my site, or later after the talk, you could connect me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Okay, let's start the talks today. So today we will shortly introduce what is conversational AI and what you could do with text conversation. And if you want to play with voice, audio, you could use speech to text service as well, and also share you some of the use case, one of the project that I worked in Hackathon before. So what is conversational AI? So when we talk about it, we could also think of like in the first beginning, people were thought of like chatbots and what we will see under the WhatsApp and also maybe on the Facebook fans page, etc. But also not only from the text space, I also enjoy to study different cases for the voice-based message because that you can imagine people have different scenarios that could using the chatbot. Sometimes that you might see on your right hand side, people could busy at work, so their hand might really busy. They could not typing messengers. So in this time, if you have a voice chatbot, then you could use just audio to connect with the robot and then to help you guide you to finish your task. And also if you are on the go or in the car when you are in traffic or when you commute to your work, that you also might want to say something to reschedule your meeting, or you want to reschedule the time that you're sending email, etc. So if in this time you don't have the time to type in your request, that you could also speak to your voice assistant, and then who could help you rearrange stuff later on. So actually, when you think about the different scenarios that you could also think of, there are also some peoples that they could be like a people who is smaller, like children's, who is a bit older, and also some people who would be like illiterate or blind, that you could think of different scenarios. Maybe some people that could not see the word, but if you have a voice assistant with him or with her, then when they walk on the street, if there's something that happens around them, then the voice assistant will tell them to just to watch out the things happening. So actually, when I see the conversational AI's topics, I could really think of a lot of different scenarios, not only from business perspective, but also from the social care, or we could bring more social benefits to different group of people. So I think that's really awesome things about the conversation AI. Okay. So today's I will share like 5 different phases about the conversational AI, and later on I will share one of the ideas which published by Rasa, one of the open source framework for building an AI system. So in 2018, like Rasa published this graph regarding like 5 different levels of what is conversational AI. So let's start from the first one. I think the first one maybe you're already quite familiar with, would be like something, just a notification. So every month you may get a notification about, hey, you should pay your bill, you should pay your rent, etc. And then, so it's kind of like a reminder. So if you set up a time, set up a task, and then your bot will just remind you. And then the second level will be include some of questions and answers. So as you see the example here, like I need to renew something and how much would it be? So you might have a list of, if this type of question, it will map to this type of answers. So it's kind of like prepared content, and then also within certain like keywords matching in this case. That's how people usually will make FAQ assistant. After the time being, like people would actually ask more and more questions, and then you will need more and more information composed to your whole scenarios for your conversation. So for example, is the example you could see here is a restaurant chatbot. So that when is the Miami restaurant open on Mondays? Then it will shows you the open times and then the close time, and then also share you some actions you would like to take later on. So like I'd like to directions, I'd like to see the menu, etc. So later on, people would actually not only gather the information from this one sentence, but also want to engage the users on this application a bit longer time. So that's why we have like this button which shows you and try to make you click the button and stay on the application. But sometimes the Q&A makers still feel like it's not so friendly as well. So as I mentioned earlier, Q&A maker usually will be built up with a lot of like articles, a lot of fact, and then later on when you ask the questions, you try to map the things together. But it won't provide you some kind of the experience like someone is taking care of you. So if you want to make a conversation more comfortable for the users to bring a better user experience, that you might want to use a level 3 contextual assistant. So what would be like? So let me take an example here. There's a user said, hello, I want to renew my stuff. How much it will be? And then it will just make sure it's the same apartment that you're staying. And then also the price of it, no, it's the apartment size of it, and then also the rent of it. So you could see actually during this conversation, you need to narrow down a lot of different details. So for example, it would be which intent that you're going to ask. And then the following up questions is like, how big is this? So you would just look at the information to follow up the things and then put this information all together and to provide you the information that you need. Okay, so what would be the later on things happening later? So as you see, the level 3, which is already happening right now at the moment, and then people were planning to have a more advanced, like a personalized assistant or autonomous organization of assistants in next 3, 5, or 10 years. So you could know, like actually for different levels of conversational AI, people try to make from small components, and then by years to years, you try to wrap it out a bit more and more complicated and make the user experience a bit more better. So from this one, you could see the next year, like 2021, maybe a little bit later, 2023, we might have a better experience about how we personalize the system. So for example, as we follow the level 3, the level 3 will shows like the different contexts that you already talked from the historical one. And then the level 4 will take all the historical one that you already talk with your chatbot or assistant, and then you provide your personalized service. And then in the level 5 will be like later on, we want to have this service more autonomous and more learned by itself. So I have another one want to share would be if you already have the map in your mind, like from the level 1 to level 5 of the conversational AI. And this picture will share you 5 different levels of like driving automation. And then you will see from the level 0 is kind of like no. And then from the level 1 is kind of like slightly you add the driver assistant. So you could imagine like we already use like Google Maps or TomTom that to help you to know which directions that you should go to. And then the second part, the partial automation, would be part of it. You maybe there are some like really simple task. You could ask your cars to do that. So it's kind of like a partially automation, but still it's supervised from the real human. So as you see from your left-hand side, which is the purple area, it says the human monitors the driving environment. And then later on, we want to shift it to the blue color area. It would be level 3, 4, and 5. So we gradually move our attention from ourselves to the automation system. It would be conditional automation. So we put more and more scenarios to that. And later on, we aim to have high automation or full automation so that in the end, maybe you could read your book, or you could also, like when you commute to your work, that you could finish some simple task during the time when you move from location A to location B. Okay. So I hope like in the first phases, any questions so far?
That looks really amazing. I think, Mia, what I really like for that now is you gave an idea that this technology, conversational AI application,
Yeah.
helps bridge the gap between different age groups, not just the young people, not just the millennials,
Yeah.
people coming who are blind, people who are old age. So that is something where we see this technology going. And as we go ahead, I think this will be in demand a lot. And people would like to learn more and see how to get started with this.
Yeah, totally agree. So I think like, for example, as you mentioned, like people in different group, they will benefit from the conversational AI. So I think like later on, I will share some of the like APIs you could try by yourself. So you could already start hacking or doing your side project from your own, and then maybe you already could start helping the people around you. So maybe you could try to help your grandparents, or if you have like kids around you, and then you could try to help them with that. I think that would be super interesting. Like if you just try to make some service start to help the people around you, and later on maybe you could make a more bigger service to help more bigger and bigger people, like bigger group
Yeah.
of people. So I think that's why we learn tech, because we want to make the tools that will help people around us. Yeah.
Yeah, starting small is something that everyone should be looking. And just
Yeah.
for a quick note, the book that Mia has authored, I've given the link of that book in the comment section. So if people want to go and maybe go and buy it right now, they can.
And then ask
That would be
questions
great.
right
Yeah.
away.
Hey, Mia, did you write this part? Okay, that
Yeah.
would be great. So if, also, I'll be sharing Mia's social connections later on towards the second half. And Mia, that's all. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So since we already know like the big picture of the conversation AI, then the next one, that if you want to start to make your own application, there are some words, or there are some phrases you have to learn first, would be intent and entity. So here I will share you some of the examples that you could start practicing right now to recognize what is intent for your sentence, or what is the entity in your sentence. So usually, like when we build a conversational AI, or when we build up a personal assistant, sometimes that we will start from a really simple task, like help us to book something, want to book flight, order food, or just say hi, like greeting. Or so you could see from the left hand side, you could see different intents about the traveling, like book flights, greeting, check weather, or book accommodation, etc. And on your right hand side, it's called like utterance. It's like small sentence, and then to show you what the sentence could bring to this intent. So intent is kind of like the actions that you want to take further. So for example, if I want to go traveling, that I would like to plan my trip, I would like to book a flight, I would like to check different activities, what I could do in my destination city, or I would like to check if I could rent a car, etc. So these are the action items that I want to do for my travel planning. So this will be the intent. Okay. So later on, if you want to see what would be the things, like I would like to book a flight, what is the weather like in France, and where do you want to go, or you just have different murmurs like hello or home in this case. So in this picture, I would like to have more introduced about the sentence, what is the weather like in France. So then we already have the actions that we know. But later on, you have different parameters that you would like to know more about this place. So it would be location, would be your entity, and then also sometimes that you also like to recognize different time, so that when you say I want to book a flight, then you have a destination, and then you have time, or you have a range of dates that you want to travel to. So that's how we could use that as different criteria to search for the best solution in your case. So if you practice again, like what is the weather like tomorrow, then the model will actually try to understand in two ways. The one will be intent. We want to request the weather. So this is the action that we would like to take. We want to request the weather. And what kind of weather? Is like today's, tomorrow, or next week. So different parameters that you could switch over during the time would be the entities that you would like to know. So you will get the date will be for tomorrow. Okay, so whenever you speak a sentence to your chatbot, you always have something that in your mind is like, what is the goal that I want to achieve right now? What is the action that I want to do right now? And next, how did my chatbot could understand me if I want to check the things within this time or within certain standard, let's say. So now if we just start to look at this one, if you want to make a smart home application that you might want to ask your smart home devices to turn on the light for you, switch off the light for you, or even change different colors of light. So now maybe in your mind, you already could start to plan what would be the intent in this case. Okay, so later on, you could also try this by yourself by clicking this link. I could also share later. This link will directly to the Microsoft Azure language understanding page. You could see here is basically the same setup as I had the screenshot in the slide. So if you click one, turn the light on, you will actually learn the intent is turn on the things. And then the entities will be, is it the right one or the left one? So if you see, like I click the turn the right light on, you will see like this action. If I say all lights off, so the intent will actually set to turn all the things off, and then the entity is none. Let's try another one. If you want to try like turn the table lights off, still already off, and then if it's all on, and then try to turn the table lights off, would be see something like this. So actually you could try like different scenarios by your own. Maybe you would like to try with different lamps, or maybe just with your television setup, or maybe your music play service setup. So I think you could try to practice a bit about how to make your chatbot to understand more about intent and entity. Okay. So let's go back to the slides here. Let me use the full screen again. So if you use the cognitive service on Azure, later on we will introduce like you use the entity recognizers, or later on you use speech recognition, etc. There's a list about for this service which language it supports. It's not only support this 7 language that I put it here. You could actually go to this link, and then as I remember, it already supports more than 15, or I think it's around 20 language already. And I think the most support language would be English and Spanish, as I remember. And then the other language is kind of like coming up later afterwards. And so you could see from here, for the English service, almost all the service that you already could use. And if you see like a different start sign, like there are two start sign or one start sign, that means like there are different version of the service is supporting right now. I think the latest one is version 3. So some of them still in the previous one, version 2, etc. So before you use it, always check the document, the docs.microsoft.com, which is super important. Like sometimes you have different scenarios that you want to try on your own, but actually maybe the service is not supporting, or maybe the service is supporting in another language. So you could always check before you started. Otherwise, like you will start to try it, but feel like frustrated, and then it's kind of like waste your time. Okay, so let's move on. The next one that I really love would be actually this graph I actually take from this paper, to see like actually how people to recognize, how people to set up a system to recognize what you are talking right now. So for example, that I'm speaking right now, so as you see, like the input will be from the left hand side, the speech signal, and then from the upper side, you is speaker discrimination, or you could think of like speaker differentiation. That means it try to differentiate if someone is speaking. So when will you use the scenario? So for example, if you just build up a chatbot, we'll always say, open the door, close the door, turn on the light, turn off the light. If like everyone in your house could do the same thing, that it doesn't matter. It's just fine without this function. But if you are building a service that is kind of like you take the meeting notes from your meetings, so you kind of you have a audio record for your meeting, and then by the timing, like probably I speak the first 10 minutes and then other people speak the next 10 minutes, then you might want to differentiate who is speaking right now and who is the content owner of this speech audio data. So then you will see people would like to know who is speaking right now. And then the next one would be speech recognition. So at the time being that when I talk as like hello world, then my computer should type as like hello world. So how does it work for the recognition? It will be like you convert by the speech model. So you will have different waves and features. I will share in the later slides. You will see like different people as like men and women speaking, and then even like dog have different audio features that you could see. So after you get these two inputs, one is like who is talking right now, and another one is what is the speaking content right now. And then you put it together, you're parsing in your service, and then you make the model afterwards. So you have the sentiment model, try to differentiate a different, is it like a positive sentence? Is it a neutral sentence, or is it a negative sentence? Or what is the intent for this sentence, etc. So before you start to call the intent service, that you have to deal with your speech data in this way. Okay. Yeah, this is the graph that I want to share. As you see from the left-hand side, you will see like the dog bark data. It's like looks so different from the children's playing. And then also there are like a car horns and then air conditioner. So you will see like for the voice data or the audio data, you always see something like the waves. And then later on, how people would actually analyze different waves. So they convert the waves as like different features because they have different periodically, and then also have different frequency, also have different peak level, etc. So when you see like a different type of the voice, you kind of like you could identify the pattern of that. And then you could see on your right hand side, I put a graph for people who speak English, Spanish, and Russian. And even it's the same language, the female speakers and the male speakers, the frequency lives different places. So then you will see from above graph, like the female speakers have a different frequencies as like the male speakers. And not only the male and the female speakers different, but also in this one, you will see people have different waves, even from speaking different language. So on the left-hand side, that you could see people who speak Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, and Finnish. And then on your right-hand side, you could see like people who speak Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc. So sometimes that we will say the different languages sounds differently. So like the rhyme, the sound of the language sounds different because they already sound differently if you see from like the audio waves here. And then I think it's like kind of interesting because originally, like maybe you don't understand the content of like when the people speak Swedish or Danish, but if you just listen to the sound, maybe you will also know like how to differentiate them. So I think like for example, when you see people who speak Asian language, then you kind of know not only see from their face, but also from like how you hear the voice, how you hear the sound is like more Asian things. And then you would also think, is it just like how it's different? I think it's not only from the words that we're speaking, but also the sounds that we are making. Yeah. So let's go back to the first one that we just mentioned earlier. If you want to try the first, if you want to differentiate the different speaker, that you could try the speaker recognition API on Azure. And then if you want to try make your like speaking sentence to an extra text, then you could try with the speech to text API. Okay. Here, I also want to share some of the important information. If you just want to play around with it, you could also start to try with the free levels of it. So if you go to the service, then you could see different service in different region with different currency, like how it can. So since I'm based in Berlin, I take Western Europe and Euro as an example. So here you could see basically if you want to use speech to text service, every month you could try like 5 hours for free service, and maybe it's just for like a POC concept. And later on, if you want to shift a bit more, people could use it, that you could consider to use the first tier of the service, etc. But I think like in the first beginning, I think feel free the layers is already enough. Okay. So here I want to share of some of the samples. Okay. So the sample code here that I shared in the Visual Studio Code, I think would be separate as different blocks. So the first part would be the framework that I'm using. I use Python 3 at the moment. And then if you use pipe installed, you could install the Azure Cognitive Service speech service, and you will get the SDK you could use here. The first that I usually will load with different parameters like my speech key, where I could use on the Cognitive Service API, I could get the secret key. And then the service region that I use right now is the Western Europe. This key that you could also get from your service, which is super important, is like it's not just you want to type like West Asia or something random words that you could type. You could always check where is your service created, and then you should type as it follows the region. And as long as you put the speech key and then the region, you will directly connect to your service. And here I prepared turn on the light wave. This is the wave files that I prepared then it's kind of the audio format. Then you log in as like, I want to use this audio file, and then I use my recognizer to recognize it. So if you want to see, so you will see it recognize like turn on the light. So for example, what is different, maybe I could share with the second samples. The second one would be the text to speech. So here, if I say something like turn on the lights, it will save to the turn on the light jet wave. But if I say it is a sunny day, and then okay, let me try with simple one. Okay. So if I put this text as audio one, then let me see if you could listen to this. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you hear that, but it also says like today is the sunny day by a like robotic sound by the woman sound. Okay. Is it loud enough or okay. Try it again.
Today is a sunny day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can hear that.
Yeah, that's good. And then, okay, so when you put this sunny day web to like speech to text again, so you could imagine like you speak something as your data input, and then you try to make this application to try to recognize what did you said earlier. Then you could go to the first sample and then say, hey, today is a sunny day. So you could always encode your text as audio and then audio to text. So I think it's a really simple one that you already could know, like what is happening. And then if you want to start to play with it, so you could speak a sentence via audio, and then you could extract the text, and then you could put the text with Lewis later or entity recognizer later so that you could play around with it. Okay, that's back to the slides a bit. So far, any questions? Should I stop here?
One question that Vedant asks is, he created a chatbot from scratch in Python with speech support, but those are like a set of question and answer. How does he make it intelligent to understand all similar questions?
Okay, so I see the question maybe I create from scratch with speech support. Yeah, but those are like the set of question and answer. How do I make it intelligent to understand all similar questions? Yeah, I think this one is a good question from Vident. So you could actually use Lewis or Dialogflow to mark as like your intent, and then you would relate it to the similar sentence that you would like to create. Okay, so for example, if I said, how much is the book? So then sometimes you will refer like directly, like how much is this book? But sometimes just like how much is it? So, but these two sentences is all referred to you want to ask the price. So then in the first beginning, you would need to set up intent, and then also with different utterance, that means sample sentence, so that your language understanding service could know what is the meaning that you want to provide, so that also the model itself will help you to find the similar meanings of it. So actually, you could imagine for all the words that we know in English, there are some words are kind of like closer to each other. So for example, if you are talk about the uncles, the fathers, the mother, the grandpa, the grandma. These words were kind of closer compared if you have a group of like dog, cat, monkeys, etc. So these words are belongs to different groups in the workspace. And once you already provide a sample sentence, like, hey, I want to see my grandparents, then this model will automatically relate to the similar words who close in the word vectors space. So then once you set up a first sample sentence as your utterance, then you would have the second and the third upcoming. So sometimes I would say it's kind of like a back and forth training, because sometimes I will think of like I already make it so clear with this five sentence as I want to say, but the model still feel like not clear enough, then I will add more two or three samples afterwards. So I think that's how you will test the different models. If you already have all the words listed that you already know, just put it. Otherwise, you would need sometimes like a back and forth, like to fine tuning. Yeah. Okay.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well answered. I think one thing to add is when you showed the example of this Lewis, right? The response that you got was in JSON. So once we get a response in JSON, I think you can integrate and use that capability to integrate into any of the application. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter like whatever. If you want to do a mobile app development or you're creating a web application, it may be a Wrangler or maybe a .NET Core. When you get a response in a JSON, you can integrate in any ecosystem of the development that you're working. So that is something very good thing to take away from the Lewis part.
Yeah, definitely. So I totally agree. Like, no matter which language or which framework that you're using right now, or which kind of the interface that you're using, you could develop as like a chatbot. So on like WhatsApp chatbot, Slack chatbot, Teams chatbot, etc. And then also you could use like voice assistant as your interface. So later on, I will share also one example of the voice assistant sample, but we will continue later on. Okay,
Okay. Makes sense.
so I will move to the next part. So the things that I want to share here, I think like maybe some of you already know, like there are some language translation service from Microsoft. So try to imagine like if you travel to a country, like you don't speak the local language. So for example, when I just moved here, I don't speak German, but I still have to dealing with some government paper. So I will bring my translator. I speak something in English, and then my translator will help me to speak as like German, so that the people could understand. So how does it work? Actually, you could see from this graph where shows you the whole picture of it. So the first, the service will try to recognize what I'm speaking right now. But sometimes that when I speaking, there are some of the words, maybe my pronunciation is not so perfect. So if you just type everything that you heard what I'm saying right now, maybe there's some words kind of like missing, or there's some is like a misspelling, etc. And then sometimes you would also have some feeling words, like okay. So there are a lot of like feeling words before or after the sentence. So you need to use a service like to help you correct what you really want to say, and then focus on like the really meanings that you try to deliver to another person. So the language translating, it had a functionality, it's called like true text, will help you autocorrect what you're saying right now. And then if you are speaking to someone who speak Japanese or speaks German, that it will translate to your target language, and then use that target language and use text to speech and to talk to someone. So if you use a speech translation in cognitive service, that the underhood will work like this. I think it's kind of interesting to know because sometimes like people would try to play around the application like with a lot of like edge case, and they would like to add some feeling words, or they are like to have some different words about like yes, no, whom, etc. But that's not the point of how we want to translate the things. So if you want to test out the service, maybe you will remind of this picture, and then you might have a better feeling about how to test the service. Okay. So, and the whole genre will be the conversational application. It contains different components that you could see here. From the left-hand side, you could see there's a lot of channels that you could use, like Skype, Facebook messengers, email, even, and Slack message or team message or different voice assistant. So when you put the input, would be like you could type, you could speaking to text, or you could use adaptive cards. So the adaptive cards is like the buttons that I just shown in the beginning of the presentation. Sometimes when the bot replies you, you would give you some suggest actions, or there are some hints that you could click on it. It's called adaptive cards. Or even like you could just tap something like on the application that it would shows the content that you want to say. And for these different channels, input, and also along with the devices that you're working on right now, you already could combine it with a lot of different scenarios. So you could use Azure Bot Service to connect them together. Or if you want to use like the flow from the Google, that's also fine. That is used also for layers that could help you gather this information together, and then to have a place that to store your intent and entity information and the logic. Um, in the center here, you will see the cognitive service includes like the speech service, as I mentioned, Q&A if you just want to make a really simple service, and then the language understanding is the one that to identify the intent and then the entity. And also, if you want to make your chatbot, also people could take pictures in it. So I remember like before I had a project, it's like a face recognition that when your friend is speaking something, and then you take a picture of your friend, then you will identify his or her emotion at the moment. So I don't know if you watched the Big Bang Theory before. So there's a guy called Sheldon. He's kind of like have the difficulties to identify his friend's emotion. So every time when he speaks something irritate people and he didn't know, and he will use the bot to identify if his friends is really angry or not. So at that time when I saw the drama, I thought it was like just as things that people imagine of. But when you combine with bot framework, and when you combine with the vision application, that you could actually make this application really work right now. So, but I would like to say this application will only applicable maybe in some of the countries, but because in Europe we have GDPR, so you are not allowed to take people just randomly. You have to ask them. But if your friend's already angry, just that doesn't work at all. So I would say it's just one case that I use different vision application combined with chatbot and different functionalities to try to make some different scenarios that you could try with the chatbot functionality. And then if you have more official work, like you have a document, like 100 page of documents to just help you how to set up a workstation, then you might want to Google, or you might want to search for what should I do right now. I'm already on the second step. So in this case, if you already have a knowledge base, then you could also build up a knowledge base with it, and then make your chatbot to help you finish that. Also, there's scenarios that also when people who work in the factory. So sometimes people who work in the factory, you will need to put a lot of things together, you might need to 10 or 15 steps to finish all the things together. So in some of the factory, they also combine with a camera. So they put a camera on the head here, and then they try to monitor my workstation. And once I put the first step and then the second step, the camera will recognize that which step I'm right now. So when I ask my assistant, like, what should I do next? So my bot will know I get stuck at the step 3, and then my voice assistant will help me like, hey, actually you should bring the blue button as this place, and then you could continuing work on that. So basically the conversational AI, if you integrate with other camera service, also integrate with some voice service, that actually you could use more general and more different cases in your place. Okay. So if you're already happy with the API, provide the different service that you have, and also you're already happy with the bot framework, happy with the Dialogflow that provide you, maybe you also want to customize a bit more about what you could provide for your user experience. So Rasa is the framework that I mentioned earlier. It provides you the abilities that you could set up the whole experiment. So for example, if I want to check the details where you want to traveling in the next week, then I will need to make sure the location and also make sure which date that you're going to go out. So I kind of like have to ask my users several questions just to make sure this 1, 2, 3 information that I want to collect is already fulfilled. So it contains like some kind of setups like how many times I could retry to ask my users about the same questions, like where are you going to do, where are you planning to do, or like different questions and with retry. And after I got all the questions and answers from the users, what would be the next step that I will take action afterwards? And then if I take the action A, action B, and action C, what would be the differences? So for example, you could imagine if I handle a chatbot assistant, the first phrase is like, I want to know where and when these people would like to go to traveling. The next one will be depends on why they go to traveling. I provide them different travel plans. If they go to business travel, maybe I will provide them a better quality hotel. If they go to just like a family trip, maybe I will advise them a family house and then a place which is more quiet and people would like to visit a bit more when they go to family trip. So even though the first phrase, you are doing the same thing for collect different answering from the different users, but the second step, you could also customize what you want to react from you meet a different group of your customer. So in this case, Russell will provide more flexibilities about how you could serve your guests, etc. And then the next one is a project that I work in a voice hackathon. You could find the project on this GitHub link. It's called like Is Alles in Ordnung. In German, it's like Is everything all right? So this case will be when I'm traveling to a place that I don't speak the local language, but sometimes that I might see some people with gathering on the street. Maybe it's something good, or maybe it's something worse. I should run away, but I don't actually speak the local language, so I don't know how to ask the question to local people. So then I could use my voice assistant. I talk to my voice assistant in the first step. My voice assistant will get my request, like which city I am right now, and then to trigger the Twitter API to know what's the trending hashtag happening in Berlin, or what's the trending hashtag in my current city. So sometimes the Twitter will shows like the latest news, but it's in local language. So in this case, I gathered the tweeters from the local news and then translate and aggregate them, send it back to the users to tell you like you're safe right now. Don't worry about it. So I think it is just one really simple scenarios that you could use. So since you already know like different levels of the service, that maybe you could also think of next time when you want to make a chatbot or when you want to make a service, what kind of service that you want to make. Okay. And I also really like this graph to show the overview for about how the users chatbot service and then the bot implementation in the backend. So from the first beginning, the users will always have to enable the chatbot, at least say hi, or it's like, hi, I'd like to talk to my service. So you always need a trigger point to enable your bot. And then the next one will be your bot service have to call your implementation, which is the real logic at your service. So in your real logic service that you will know now you're greeting, now you would like to request something, etc. And then you repeat the mid part of the graph here. You get the request from the user, and then you got something that you send to your backend. Your backend understand what you're talking right now, respond you with proper sentence. So after the certain loop, maybe the user is happy enough, so he or she might want to say goodbye to the service, or in the end, if they don't use the service, they also want to remove the chatbot from their space as well. So this graph will shows you the whole life cycles about how people start to trigger a chatbot till like how to turn off the chatbot. Okay. So here are some advice that I would like to give it to you. So I know like some people might already start work with conversational AI, and some of you might like really new just to know there are some possibilities to use Python framework to get your speech data. So then you might try to the service that I shared today, the Azure Cognitive Service API with speech to text or text to speech. And then later on, you use Louis or different bot framework to help you to identify different intent or entities, and you set up the whole experience for your user. Later on, if you already happy with it, you could also migrate what you already done on the bot framework or on Floor to Rasa to have a more robust and then the more detailed level for your service. So this is will be the advice that I will share to you. So I think that's it. If there's any questions, that also feel free to write it down here. Okay. The second, sorry, I think I need to set up the.
No, I think it's. I think
Yeah.
I was muted.
Yeah, I was like,
And
I saw you're speaking, but I just like maybe I should turn my audio. Yeah, yeah,
one thing that I really liked was that you mentioned about using bot framework. I think if one uses bot framework, talking about the Azure, if they're doing it in Azure, so Azure provides a very easy step-by-step approach to create your first bot application. You can go in and select your region where you want to host. You can select your different channels, and then it gives you an entire project. You can actually download it and open it in the Visual Studio and go ahead and start programming it.
yeah,
One thing,
definitely.
one thing I would surely like to ask you, Mia, is of course you're an AI MVP, you're a Microsoft AI MVP, so I know that C Sharp may be your go-to language, but indeed your GitHub link says by Mia. So what actually programming language you as an AI developer or a data scientist use in your day-to-day life, and what is the preferred language?
Yeah, I think like in my daily work that I usually will use Python the most, like almost 99%. There's 1% that I may need some SQL. I need to aggregate some of the data. I know there are some people also is a C sharp developers in the community. I think you don't have to feel panic like if you definitely need to learn another language, because also as I understand like Microsoft also want to involve C sharp developers a bit more. So you could imagine C sharp also would have the SDK to talk with the APIs that I mentioned earlier. So you still have the capabilities that you could use AI cognitive service or the bot framework service that you could work with that. And then when you have all the scenarios that you prepared, maybe you would like to work on more different scenarios, like you want to make as like embedded system, or like you try to deploy it in different places. Once you meet like the real things that stop you, then you start learning it. But if you have done nothing and then in the really beginning you feel panic and then you start to learn A, learn B, learn C, and then in the end you didn't done anything, you still feel frustrated. So I would say if you already is a Python programmer, then it's fine that you could start with it. And if you're not a Python programmer, you could also check, because I know like TensorFlow now they also release TensorFlow JS. So that means if you write the JSON JavaScript, that you could also use it as your framework, that you don't always have to adapt to Python. Because I think now, because people understand more and more how it works, so now people would have more and more different frameworks, and also people will try to use like TensorFlow on different like JS or different languages as well. And then on C Sharp, you could have like CNTK, and then also you could use different SDKs that release from Microsoft, which is super friendly. So I would say for me myself, actually my first job, actually I worked as a C Sharp backend engineer, and then after that, I switched my career a bit more to data consultant or data scientist. At that time, I kind of like learned by the time that I worked there. So actually, for me, I would say if you are a C sharp developers, if you want to slowly move to Python, it's not a really difficult thing, because you already have one thing you're already good at. And then the mindset for programming is kind of similar across these two different languages. There are some minor things are different, but the whole concept is like quite similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think getting started with Python or any of the language is going to be very easy if you have any of the programming knowledge,
Yeah.
language knowledge. I started with C Sharp, then I moved into Python, and now I work
Yeah.
in this RPA. So, one thing to question here, Mia, is what are the different services and libraries one should use, not just for this AI conversation, or just for a basic machine learning? Because I've seen people would go and start learning Python, they would get stuck with NumPy, SciPy, Matplot, and by the time they
Yeah.
complete it, they feel like, oh, what is this? I'm just doing some sample plotting and all graph. So, what should be the approach after doing all these basic libraries, and how should they proceed from there, more toward development's approach?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, because like every day there's a lot of new Python package release. And then I usually will start the scenarios that I feel most interested in. So let's take conversational AI as an example. I start to look at it, start from one of the hackathons that I joined. So I actually start with the scenarios like people want to use voice assistant at a time. So then I would like to make anything is possible to make this voice assistant work. So if you have a program or a questions that you feel most interesting in your life, then you could try to get an open data set about it. And then if it's like machine learning questions, maybe you could start work with a scikit-learn or the pandas as you mentioned, and then also use try to plot it as you could understand. And if you want to know more about like image data, audio data, or text data, that you might need to work with the TensorFlow, Keras, or Spacey library, etc. So I would say that for me, the faster way to learn one stuff would be start with the scenarios and then the use case that I'm interested in, because you would definitely want the things happen. So if now I want to ask the attendees right now, hey, you go to read that book, Deep Learning in 300 Days. You go to read that book, Good at Python in 20 days. Like, no one will actually use it. I mean, this device, but like people wouldn't definitely take it. But if you say, hey, try to find something that you want to solve. So for example, like if like yesterday, I think like I want to buy something from the online market, that I would like to check what is the price over there, what is the best time I should click like the buy button, etc. Then I would like to monitor the price range. I might want to predict what is the best price for me to buy and etc. So in this case, you have a scenarios that you try to work on it, and then you have the most motivation to work on it. So I would say start something that you could play around with it, and after that try some like real scenarios that you could work on. And then I would say next step, you could also check what people have done online on GitHub, because usually the questions that come to you, you are not the first one to develop it. I would say, like, always there's someone more smarter than you, more younger than you, then they already write something really fantastic, and you could always see, oh, I don't know how this work in this way, and then it's kind of like a bring you more inspiration and then bring you more different approach on it. So yeah, I would say depends. Start from the really simple one. Try to find something you're interested, and then also go to check what people could do like in really awesome way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. When you said that people have already done it, you can still go and explore. A couple of
Yeah.
instances that people would see is if they go and get started by working on different data set, as you said, people will encounter with these two data sets. That's for sure. First one is Titanic data set, and the second one is the Irish flower. I mean,
Yeah,
this.
definitely.
And if you go to Kaggle, if you, I'm sorry for the background noise. So if you go to this the data set, and if you go to the Kaggle, you will find people working on this, and people still go and push their requests. They've come up with some
Yes,
very
definitely.
accuracy. So indeed, that should be the first preferred choice. Adding, I think we are already over time now. We are 1 hour and 7. I'll ask you a couple last maybe question about,
Yeah.
is there any certification that Microsoft has that will help people to go ahead and have a proof that hey, they are certified?
Yeah, I think like you could search for the AI 100. It's called like AI Engineer Certificate, and for me, I quite enjoy to learning the things about it. So, actually, when people talk about like AI and data, a lot of people will go for like AI engineers or data scientists, but there are also a huge demand for the data engineering. That means if you are people who work as backend before, or you work with database before, that you actually know more about the database, you know more about the system management, and you know how to integrate Kafka and different event hub and then database, different service, etc. Then maybe you could have a look on the data engineering trick as well. So I would definitely suggest that if you look for something similar things, go to Microsoft to learn. It's like a lot of things already prepared, and then you could select from different levels, from this have like 100, 200, 300, and 400 different levels. So you could start with a really simple one, and then if you feel like, oh, that's too simple for me, you start with the 200 later on. And I think like for me, I checked the AI 100 certificate learning path, and I found it's like there are some really useful tips that you could always learn from that, and then you will know how to work with Azure as well. So I would definitely suggest that you could have a look on it on the MS Learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's well said. I think Microsoft AI 100
Yeah.
is the beginners level that you would like to take. For now, they're not taking the exams because it's COVID-19 and it was
Yes,
happening.
I know.
So
Yes.
I got an email. I had an exam schedule for AZ 300. Although I gave it, I wanted to. I had two vouchers. So if you go and buy a couple of exams, you get some free vouchers and trial too. I had one for AZ 300, but eventually this COVID-19 happened, so we could do it. But I think that those are the certifications that you should be surely looking for, and you should get started. And
Yeah.
any as you wrap, Mia, any one last tip that you would like to give to the guys who have been staying us for so long in this live broadcast? Any tip that you would like to give to them?
I would say start with the small stuff and then build your confidence about it. And then I think your confidence will brings you a longer way as a data scientist or data engineer. Yeah.
That said, I think don't worry if it's a scikit-learn code. And it really doesn't matter. People start from
Yeah, definitely.
scikit-learn, then TensorFlow, then they move into Keras, and then they go ahead and start exploring different libraries. So it's totally fine. Start small. Well said by Mia. So that was a really amazing session, Mia. Thank you so much for your time. On
Thank you
behalf
for
of
your
entire
time.
C Sharp Corner community and its millions of viewers, I want to thank for your valuable time and your contribution towards the community. We would love to have you back once again. And
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Nice
Take
to
care.
talk to you.